Hi everyone, welcome back to Maximum Attack Rallying and some big news. Yes, I've bought another car. Oh, it's exciting, and it's also exciting because of the way in which it's happened. So you will notice I am in my usual location. So I bought a car blind, completely blind, and I bought what is arguably at least the worst Ford ever made, the Mark 5 Escort. I don't even know where to begin. Some of you will probably switch off immediately, such is the hatred for this car in some quarters, but I'm going to try and justify why I've bought it. I will do my best to show you what it's like, having still never seen it, and maybe talk a little bit about why some of the hate is unjustified. So, I think the best place that we can start is with a history lesson. So the Ford Escort has been around for a long time. I think it came out originally in 1968 in Mark 1 form, and then there was a Mark 2 came along. I think that was in 1976 or 74. Might have been 74. I'll put a little bubble up above my head confirming that because I can't remember. And then in around 1980, everything changed. They went front-wheel drive with the Mark III, Project Erica, and then I think it was in 1985 we got the Mark IV, which was a slight I'm going to say a slight facelift, but they did actually change quite a lot with the Mark IV. And then in 1990, we got the Mark V, which is what this tale is all around. Now, as I said, for some people, this is considered the worst Ford in all of history. It's not. I think, what was that? They did a car in America, didn't they, that was very bad. I can't remember. Anyway, doesn't matter, does it? We're talking about Ford of Europe and the Ford Escort, the European Escort. If you're living in the States, obviously the Escort will be slightly different for you. But this is the European Escort. So, it was a bit of a saga for Ford, this car. So, they boasted at the time that they'd spent $1 billion on developing the all-new Escort for the new decade, for the 1990s. And it was, in many ways, it was an all-new car. It was a new platform. It was longer, it was wider, more interior space, new dashboard, new styling, blah, 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 blah. And in some ways it was good because it was bigger and more spacious, and that was fine. The problem is that in other ways it wasn't so good. So unfortunately, they had a plan. There was an idea to use a new 16-valve engine that they called the Zeta at the time, which later went on to be known as the Zetec. But that was delayed a bit, so it wasn't launched with the car. So that meant that the new Escort came with all of the same engines as the old one. So it had a 1.3 litre overhead valve engine as the entry level, which had been around since the 50s. They had the 1.4 and 1.6 litre CVHs, which had been used in the Mark III and the Mark IV. And then there was a 1.8 non-turbo diesel, which was terrible. So that was a bit of a problem. And I think it's also important to remember that a lot of the criticism was actually aimed at the entry-level cars. So if you bought a 1.3 Popular, it was a bit rubbish. You know, there was criticism about the interior being a bit basic in places, the seats not being the steering wasn't the best, and the handling wasn't great because, unfortunately for the Mark V, while it had apparently cost $1 billion, the accountants had got involved and they'd found ways to cut costs. And one of the ways that they cut costs was to not fit a front anti-roll bar to entry-level cars. So 1.3 cars and initially 1.4 cars didn't have a front anti-roll bar. And that made them not handle very well. And that criticism that was levelled at those cars, unfortunately, kind of tainted all of the others. So if you bought a 1.6 fuel-injected Ghia, for example, that was actually perfectly fine. But if you bought a 1.3 Popular, not so much. And that was the problem, really. I think, you know, that criticism of those very early press drives, of those very early base model cars, kind of stuck with the Escort for the rest of its life. And Ford actually very quickly went to work on improving the car. So even as early as 1991, they were making changes. They'd actually introduced the front anti-roll bar onto 1400 models immediately, I think, after very, very early press drives. So they went to work straight away trying to fix it. In 92, the Zetec engines started to arrive and replace some of the CVH engines. So things got better there. In 93, they did the smiley face facelift, which involved a new grille and new tail lights. That also brought in a few interior changes and further suspension changes. And by that point, to be honest, the car was fine. It wasn't as good as a Peugeot 306, which came out in 93, for example, But, you know, you have to remember that this was not a particularly great time. The Escort was okay, it was perhaps a bit bland, but, you know, maybe this was an era of slightly bland cars. Yes, the 306 was very good, the Fiat Tipo was very good in some ways, Citroën ZX was quite good in some ways, but, you know, the Mark III Astra came out at around the same time as the Mark V Escort and was pretty dreary, and the Mark III Golf came out, I think 91 or 92, didn't it, and was also pretty dreary. So I think it's worth remembering a bit of context, and also I think it's worth saying at this point that while some road testers might have been quite critical of the car, it was actually commercially very successful. You know, I think it topped the sales charts for quite a while, and I think that shows that while it might not have been the darling of the motoring press, it was a car that sold. It was a car that did a job. You know, Ford had designed that car to appeal to Joe Average in the street and be an affordable family car, and also a sensible choice for people running big fleets of company cars. So for them, did it matter that the steering wasn't the best? Did it matter that it didn't have the most refined engine? In reality, probably not. You know, so I think we have to remember also that it was a car designed to do a job, as most cars are, and you know, a car that the motoring press likes isn't always something that translates to sales. Thinking of another example close to my heart, I used to have a Megane Renault Sport 265. That car was lauded over by journalists, and it was fantastic. But relative to cars like the Golf GTI, it sold in tiny numbers because for most people it was too stiff, too impractical, and too compromised. It went too far in the kind of sporty direction rather than being kind of everyday friendly. So I think it is worth remembering that, yes, Ford did perhaps get it a bit wrong, and they did. They were a little bit cynical and kind of designed it to a price and cut some corners to try and make it average. But at the same time, it did still sell well. So you could argue that as a product designed to fit a role within the market, it was actually quite good. And I think it's also worth remembering, I touched on this earlier, that, you know, a lot of this criticism was at the base models. If you bought an RS2000, for example, that car, even if you read contemporary reviews, it actually reviewed very, very well. You know, people, I've read Autocar and things, and they said it was quite actually a good car. I've seen Chris Goffey talking about the Mark V XR3i and saying it was a good car, it handled well, and all this stuff. So I think, unfortunately, like I said, it's the kind of the base model that's tainted everything. And you know, by 95, when the final facelift came out for the Mark VI, as it's known, that was into the Richard Parry-Jones era. Richard Parry-Jones is a famous engineer who masterminded the handling of the Focus and the Mark IV and V Fiesta and the Mondeo. You know, and some of that was put into those later Escorts, and they were perfectly fine. You know, yes, they weren't quite as good as the 306, which I think was probably the class leader in many ways, but they were perfectly fine. So I know I'm biased, I admit that I'm biased, but I just wanted to say that because I think it's important to add a bit of balance. I understand why people don't like the early cars. So a friend of mine, he had a 1990 1.3 Encore as his first car, and I drove it, and at the time, which is the purpose of this story, at the time I had an Escort, and you could tell the difference. You know, mine had the roll bar, mine was a slightly higher spec car, and you could tell the difference. So I get it. But anyway, that brings us on to why. The why is very important. Why have I bought a Mark V Escort? Well, it's because nostalgia. We love nostalgia, don't we? We love nostalgia right now. There's a big thing in the classic car world of prices going mad because people are buying up stuff that they couldn't afford when they were young. And it's kind of, I mean, it's not that because this wasn't expensive, but it is absolutely a nostalgia thing. So I had a Mark V Escort for my first car, and recently I was chatting to a friend of mine about the rarity of 90s cars, because a lot of those cars have disappeared. You know, 90s cars are actually getting quite hard to find. A lot of them were the victim of the scrappage schemes that were run in the UK a few years ago. So there's not as many left, and the ones that are left, the prices have gone up. So foolishly, I was browsing eBay one day, as you do, and just looking at various 90s cars, seeing what was about, and I happened upon a 1994 Ford Escort 1.4 Equip, and that's where things went a bit wrong. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, John, that's an Orion, you idiot. No, it's not. So, more history. There's more history here. So alongside the Escort since the early 80s. I think it was 84. Ford introduced the Orion, which was effectively a four-door saloon version, or sedan if you're American, version of the Escort. It was originally supposed to be slightly more upmarket, so the Orion was not available in the lowest trim levels that the Escort was available. I think it originally was only available in GL or Gear, but then they introduced LX and L and things a bit later on, but it wasn't available in the very, very base models. And the Orion was actually quite a successful car, and by the 90s it was making up 25% of overall Escort and Orion sales. So in 1993, when they did a very minor facelift, Ford decided that the best thing that they could do was to merge the two. So they dropped the Orion name and just instead marketed them as Escort Saloons, or Escort four-doors, and that is the reason that my car is not an Orion, but it is an Escort. So it was just a badging exercise to make the sales figures for the Escort look better, effectively. So from 93 onwards, you could still buy an Orion, but it was just badged as an Escort. So my first car was an Escort Equip, and it was in Pacifica Blue, which was one of the colours offered only on sporting models generally, but it was Ford in 93 and 94 introduced some special editions, Equip, Sapphire and Mistral, I think, and they were kind of low spec cars but were offered in nice colours with a few extras, and that is what the Escort Equip is. So I was browsing eBay, as you do, and what should pop up but an Escort Equip? And you know how it is, I kept looking at it and thinking, God, I used to have one of those, that would be quite fun. I sent the guy a few questions, asked for a few pictures of it. It was up for £990, which wasn't a huge amount of money. And I thought, well, do I need that? No. Would I quite like it? Yes. Are Escorts getting quite rare? Yes. So we messaged back and forth a bit, and I made him an offer for it, not thinking he'd accept it. You know, having looked at the pictures, I thought, well, it's going to need a little bit of work. It might need a little bit of work to the sills. And he accepted my offer. And yeah, so I bought the car having never seen it. I've not seen it in person. I asked around a few friends, found someone in the area that could collect it. So it was down near Gatwick. So it was then transported to the same place that my Escort F2 car is stored. Because I thought, you know what, I'll buy it, I'll put it away, and it's there. I can work on it a little bit in the future, get it to where I want it to be, and just have it as a kind of fun weekend toy, you know, just something to drive around in, a bit of nostalgia, as I said. And yeah, so I've bought a car that I haven't seen. I still haven't seen it. It arrived at the storage place last week. My friend has been to look at it, so the pictures that you've seen so far are just from eBay. So I sent a friend of mine to go and have a look at it while after it was dropped off, because I thought, well, he can go over it, unbiased, of course, and just have a look over it. Send me some more pictures and videos, and I'll have an idea if I've bought a good car or if I've bought a complete rust box. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, Will, I love you, but oh God, the pictures and video he did were not good. His phone is terrible. Will, I love you, buy a new phone. But I will put those up now so you can see the condition, and I mean, it looks like the pictures were taken in the 1800s, but we'll have to make do for now. I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised. So I was told that the car was one owner, it'd done 83,000 miles, it'd been off the road for 10 years, been in dry storage, and that it was in good condition. The only faults that were described, the airbag light is on, which doesn't bother me because that'll just be a wire or something silly. It's running a little bit rough, which I would imagine is probably the idle control valve. And that rust-wise, it's okay, but it's been jacked up in the wrong place on the sills, which has done a little bit of damage, and it's caused a little bit of rust. So I thought, well, is that going to be true? It's a 90s Ford. It's probably going to be really rusty. Having seen the pictures and videos that my friend Will took, honestly, it looks pretty good. For what I paid for it, I have to say I'm relatively happy. Obviously, I need to go and see it in person and have a look and have a prod and see it properly, but I must say it looks pretty good. You know, I've looked through the MOT history. There's not lots. It has been off the road for 10 years. I think when it was last MOT'd back in 2015, it got an advisory for rusty brake pipes. there isn't too much. The mileage seems to tally up, but there's no horror stories in its history that I can see. And judging by the condition in the pictures, it looks all right. There's a little bit of rust underneath, nothing that looks too scary. I know that the sills need to be replaced not because of rust that's through age, but rust through this person at some point in its life jacking it up. Instead of jacking it up underneath the car properly, they've jacked it up on the point where the sills meet the floor and has crushed that, which has obviously damaged the paint and sealant and allowed that to rust a bit. But that isn't the worst job in the world. I've done it before. I know that I can fix that, and the repair panels are very cheap. So I'm not too worried about that. Overall, though, I've got to say it looks pretty good. The interior looks okay. The material on the driver's seat looks a little bit kind of loose, but it doesn't look ripped or anything. Paintwork looks okay for the age. It's very dusty, obviously, so will need to be cleaned up. But I've got to say, overall, I'm pretty happy. I think it looks like a bit of a result. Another friend of mine's going to try and go over there at some point and have a look and take some pictures without using a potato instead of a camera, and he'll have a look over it, and he's a bit more of a hands-on mechanic type guy, so obviously he'll give me another opinion. But I have to say, overall, I'm pretty happy. So what am I going to do with it is the big question, isn't it? Like I said, I bought it as a bit of a nostalgia trip. You know, it was first car for me. I've had lots of Escorts over the years. Certainly in my early years of driving, it's been a long time since I've had one, aside from the rally ones. It was a car that I loved when I was a teenager, even though a lot of other people hated it. And there was reasons for that. So obviously there was the F2 connection with the RS2000 rally cars, which I loved. Of course, there was the Escort Cosworth, again, rallying as well on the one side, but also the road cars. The Escort Cosworth as a road car fascinated me when I was a kid. I still think it's such a stunning looking thing with the wider arches and whale tail and everything. So there was that. And also, there was a couple of people who are a bit older than me. They had Orions at the time, and I just thought they were quite cool. They were modified, lowered, and various things. And they just appealed to me. I've always thought, for all of the criticism that generation of Escort was actually quite a nice looking car, especially in RS and XR3i form, I just thought it was quite nicely proportioned, and the sporting models had quite nice details and stuff. So there's that, and obviously, yeah, so that is how I ended up with one as my first car. That was a 1.4 litre equip, which was very slow. This is a 1.6 litre equip, so it has the 16 valve Zeta engine. It's still very slow, it's 90 horsepower, I think, but a bit better than the 1400. So it's just a nice bit of nostalgia, and I always wanted, so I had the Equip as my first car. Over the following years, I had a few more Escorts in various states of modifications, which I'll put some pictures up of right now. And I had a couple that had 2 litre engines fitted from Mondeos, which was quite a good conversion at the time. Obviously, wouldn't feel very quick nowadays, but at the time they felt pretty good. Kind of brought them into line with RS2000s and Fiesta STs and stuff of the time. But I always wanted, with the Equip, they were always in nice colours, and I always wanted to do one with all the RS2000 styling on it, nice wheels and a Z-Tech turbo engine conversion, but I never managed to do it. I think I had 3 Equips, and I never quite got there. And when I saw this one, I thought, you know what, I'm going to buy it. It's a bit of nostalgia. Will I do all of that stuff to it? I don't know, but I can fix it up, and it's a nice reminder of that time in my life where I had a lot of fun tinkering with cars. And I'm obviously now in a position where I can do some of that stuff without having to worry about it as much. So the plan is basically to try and go down that kind of path. There's no rush, you know, obviously I'm in a different country and haven't seen the car yet still, but it's going to be a case of, you know, ordering a few parts here and there. I'll obviously order the sills and cam belt and things like that to get it back on the road, and then just start to get a few bits for it. You know, we'll do wheels and suspension and RS2000, you know, bumper and lights and stuff like that, and maybe some Recaro seats and stuff, and you know, eventually maybe we'll come to the point of doing engine stuff. But honestly, I'm not too fussed about that at this point. It's just a case of, you know, enjoying that kind of nostalgia of a period in my life where I spent a lot of time around those cars. I knew a lot of people that had them, and we just had a lot of fun modifying them and driving them around and doing all that youthful stuff. So I just thought, you know what, before these cars get impossible to find, or impossibly expensive. You know, you only have to look on eBay to see what people are now asking, even for that generation of Escort. I didn't pay anything like some of the prices that people are asking. So I just thought, you know what, it's worth the risk. It's worth that irresponsible blind purchase, and hopefully to just have some fun with it and just have a nice little project. So there we are. That's it. That is why I bought the worst Ford ever made without ever having seen it. Is it the worst Ford ever made? No, because A, I think all the criticism is a little bit overhyped, and B, it's not even one of the particular cars that were the worst examples of the Mark 5 Escort. I understand that a lot of people will look at it and think you are a complete idiot. Obviously, I know it's not a rally car, which is what this channel is usually about, but I don't care about that either. This is something for me, and just something that I've bought to enjoy and just have kind of for myself. So it is obviously going to be a little while before we get into it too much. I really want to get over to the UK and have a proper look at it and record it and drive it and have a bit of fun with it. So I will do that as soon as possible. I'm not sure exactly when yet, but I will do it as soon as possible. And obviously I want to get stuck into it, try and put it in for an MOT and see if it'll pass and see what else it needs, and just, you know, get through all the little issues, and then obviously start the fun stuff of deciding what wheels I want to put on it and what suspension I'm going to put on it, and trying to find bits and pieces. Obviously, since I bought it, I've been spending a lot of time on eBay looking for parts, and my watch list is full of Escort parts now. So things will happen. I'll just try and pick up bits and pieces as I go. Unfortunately, while I can afford the car these days, a lot of the parts have got a lot more expensive, unfortunately, since the old days, and a lot harder to find. But I will persist and just keep trying to pick up bits and pieces when I can. So there it is. There is an explanation of why I bought this car blind. And would I recommend doing it? No. No, don't buy a car without seeing it. It's really dumb. I think, based on what I've seen, and this is a bit of an assumption because I haven't seen the car properly, it looks okay, but it is quite scary. It is quite scary sending money to someone, sending money to a transport company for something that you've never seen and that could be crap. And it could still be crap, but hopefully it won't. So there we go. Let's wrap this video up. I hope you enjoyed that little insight into this slightly stupid purchase. Do keep an eye on it. I will try and do some more updates once, as I say, once my friend gets over and takes some more pictures. Maybe I'll do a quick follow-up and do a bit more of a detailed look at some of the areas of the car. And I'll keep you updated, obviously, on progress. Otherwise, as always, you know the score. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think below. You're welcome to throw abuse at me. And I will see you again next time.